Howdy, my name is Maria Furness, and for my presentation, I looked at childhood physical development between 6 and 12 years old. So some normative milestones to look out for would be 1, slow and steady physical growth. Secondly, improvement in their gross motor and fine motor skills. Third, brain development. Fourth would be their growth spurt and weight gain before puberty. And the fifth would be the positive relationship with physical activity in their bodies. So the first one, slow and steady physical growth. So around this time, kids gain about 5 to 7 pounds per year and grow 2 to 3 inches per year. So basically, they slim down, they gain muscle mass, they improve lung capacity so they can do physical activity for longer periods of time. And they're more balanced and they have more agility so they can do like balance beams and just more complex tasks. And this is all supported by proper nutrition and regular physical activity. And it's important to be aware of their rate of physical growth because as we know, development builds on itself. So if there's malnutrition or something going on with their development here, that will impact their development later in life. So just some key things to look out for. Secondly, there's an improvement in gross motor and fine motor skills. So for gross motor skills, they just improve and become more complex. So they can ride a bike and do things like that. For their improved fine motor skills, they can cut their fingernails, they can button their shirts. Penmanship improves at this stage, which is also tied to their academic achievements, so something to be mindful of. And just overall, there's a greater control of their bodies, so they can do more things, so they can explore the world around them a little better. And this just lays the foundation for future developmental milestones, so their ability to be able to throw a ball earlier in this stage helps them to play sports like basketball and baseball later. The third thing to look out for would be brain development. So there's greater myelination in the corpus callosum, so they're able to be more coordinated, there's greater motor control. There's also a growth of the cerebellum, so there's greater balance. And then there's pruning of unused synapses, so there's increased motor speed and reaction time. So if somebody throws a ball at them, they can process that and catch it a little bit better. And then between the ages of 10 and 12, their frontal lobes are more developed, which helps them with logic, planning, and memory. I'm not going to go into any more depth of this because I believe another presentation is going into this. Fourth, there's a growth spurt and weight gain right before puberty. So their percentage of body fat increases in preparation for their growth spurt during puberty. And this happens a little bit sooner for girls, so they can be taller and a little bit stockier than the boys in their class, which unfortunately can lead to some body dissatisfaction, especially if you don't see this coming or they're kind of getting into comparison at this stage as well. So this happens for both boys and girls, body dissatisfaction, so it's important to assess for this and then also just if you can educate parents and if you're working with kids just to let them know that this is happening and it's normal and they will grow out of it. And then the fifth one I had is having a positive relationship with physical activity in their bodies. And I don't know if this is a milestone per se, but I think it's important to assess that they are where they need to be at this stage because this can influence their development in some pretty drastic ways. So as I mentioned before, it's important to assess for body dissatisfaction because especially girls can be susceptible to eating disorders at this time. If they're not getting the nutrients they need, that can impact their physical development in later stages. And then just overall important to assess what is their attitude towards physical activity. Is that something they find enjoyment in? It's important to also look at what are their parents' attitudes during physical activity because that impacts their children's. There can also be some shame and embarrassment around this time. You have gym class if you're not good at a certain sport or activity. That can be a deterrent in just having a positive relationship with physical activity. And then a big thing during this stage is that social relationships are at an all-time high. So a lot of this is happening at school and just in a social context. So moving on, some other considerations would be the impact of poverty is something to look out for. So malnutrition can be a concern. Do they have proper access to healthcare and regular screenings? And then there can also be less parental supervision at this time, especially if one or both parents are working. So just being mindful of their specific needs, and then also recognizing that development doesn't happen the same way for everyone. So what's the impact of their biology and their family history, their environment? Is there a lot of stress going on? Because that can impact their physical development. Different cultures have different normative standards for developmental growth. So just being mindful of that. And then also if there's any trauma going on in their home or in their past, just all these things to kind of nuance and see each child in the context that they grew up in and just the full system. So for atypical development, some things to look out for. Major one would be obesity. So obesity is defined as a child whose BMI is at or above the 95th percentile. This can be a pretty big concern just because there can be short and long-term health problems such as heart disease or high blood pressure. This can also lead to bullying, low academic achievement, and ultimately depression. So some things you can do as a counselor to support your clients who may be facing this would be to assess their level of physical activity. So they don't recommend dieting for kids at this age, but also although nutrition is important, it's more looking at their physical activity. They'll say that eating dinner as a family can be a protective factor against this. So usually eating a little bit more intentionally, and you can also refer to a nutritionist if need be. So practice items. 7.1 is to discuss physical development in early childhood. So early childhood is 2 to 6 years old before we were looking at 6 to 12. So for these kids, they grow about 3 inches in height and gain 4 to 5 pounds in weight each year. So they grow in spurts. And they can gain abilities in locomotion, improve gross motor skills, and refined motor skills. So they can do tasks like pour water into a container, they can color, use scissors. So some of the things we have already been talking about, they're just not quite as good at them yet. And then a lot of this happens through play or exploration of the world around them. The other practice item I had is to identify patterns of physical and motor development during middle childhood and common health issues. So we really already covered physical and motor development. Just a little recap in case you forgot. Slow and steady growth is a big earmark of this time, and improved fine and gross motor skills. And some common health issues are childhood accidents such as falling is a big one, obesity and body dissatisfaction, both of which we already covered. And then for myself of the counselor question, what is your relationship with your own body and physical health? And I ask this just because I think it impacts how we understand our clients and what we see as important. And then those are my sources. Thank you guys so much.